I'm going to keep the intro brief because there's a lot to go over. This is the most extensive video in the little Calamity mod Potions series that I have going on by a long shot, and that's because this time I'm talking about the buff potions, and Calamity adds a lot of them. I'll be quickly covering a few repeat items that appeared in an earlier video, and then simply going over each potion in alphabetical order, splitting the video between those that are obtainable in pre-hard mode and those you get in hard mode. I'll be kind of rapid firing these at you, so pay attention. Let's get started. First, the repeats. The Aurea Cell, Bloodfin, and Heidel Stew are items that are classified as recovery potions as well as buff potions, and were covered in the Calamity recovery potions video that I made. One is a kind of mana potion, and the other two are health potions, all additionally giving the player some kind of buff. If you want to know more about these, go check out my other potion video, all the information is there. Now we're gonna get straight into pre-hard mode. First on the list is Anechoic Coating. This potion reduces the detection ranges of abyssal creatures. The Abyss, a custom deep ocean biome where you can find such creatures, is exceptionally dark, and most of the enemies that are found there are completely passive unless the player comes too close or attacks them. This item allows you to get slightly closer to the enemies without being detected, so you can traverse the biome more safely. Anechoic Coating can be crafted at an alchemy table with blood orbs, and can also drop from a selection of abyssal enemies. From the deep dark, we now bounce into the clouds with the Bounding Potion. When used, it gives the player the bounding buff, increasing jump height by 10, jump speed by 5%, and fall resistance by 25 blocks. This is a nice mobility buff, which you can think of as similar to the Frog Leg, which provides the same kinds of stats. You can make these potions with a frog and a vine, or with blood orbs, which let me explain before going any further. Blood orbs are a drop from Blood Moon enemies that can be substituted for the standard materials needed to make almost every vanilla and Calamity potion in the game, and being used this way is the main purpose of this material. For example, they can also be used to make the Calcium Potion. This potion gives the player immunity to fall damage, because we all know that drinking a glass of milk before jumping from a great height is the best way to make sure your bones stay intact. Obviously, it's just a convenient effect, useful for exploring caves and such, and along with the blood orbs can also be made with ancient bone dust. The Potion of Omniscience is something that doesn't sound like it belongs in pre-hard mode at all. This potion gives the player the Omniscience buff, which combines the effects of the Hunter, Spelunker, and Danger Sense potions, and is also as easy to make as slapping those three potions together at an alchemy table. The Omniscience buff does the highlighting of treasures, enemies, and traps that the material potions provide, and additionally highlights all enemy projectiles, which is pretty nice when you're spelunking in low light and enemies are throwing projectiles at you. Moving on, we have the Shadow Potion, which provides the Shadow buff and turns the player into a shadow with glowing red eyes, so you can be just like your favorite edgy anime antagonist. It also increases stealth regeneration by 8% and causes rogue weapons to spawn homing shadow projectiles with a 0.5 second cooldown, which deal 10% of the weapon's damage. So you probably want to be using this potion if you're playing the rogue class. It can be made with a Shadowfish, here's where you can find that, and a Blink Root. In the same vein as the Anechoic Coating, the Sulfur Skin Potion assists with travel through the sea, the nasty sulfurous sea that has eaten one of your pure oceans in the Calamity mod, that is. This potion gives the Sulfur Skin buff, which halves the buildup rate of the poison meter that appears while in the sulfurous water. The poison bar used to inflict a damage over time debuff called sulfuric poisoning that this potion alleviated. However, contrary to what you still currently find on the wiki, the sulfurous water no longer inflicts the debuff, and the Sulfur Skin Potion does not have any effect on the damage that it does to the player. You can find these potions in rusty chests in the sulfurous sea, or can craft them with sulfurous sand. And alright, enough sulfur. As a gamer, I'm stinky enough already. The Tesla Potion what a transition. The Tesla Potion grants a buff called Tesla's Electricity, which creates an aura of electricity around the player that deals 15 typeless damage per second. When it damages enemies, the electricity inflicts the Electrified debuff for 3 seconds, which deals damage over time, and the Galvanic Corrosion debuff for 0.1 seconds, which slows enemies significantly for its duration. This potion just provides some nice passive damage, especially in the early game, and is useful for keeping keeping enemies at a distance. The Galvanic Corrosion debuff seemingly also can be applied to some bosses. However, after being inflicted with it once, a boss in the Calamity mod will be immune to the debuff for 3 minutes, so not really helping too much in regards to boss fights. To make the potion, you need Aerolite ore, Sea Prisms, Pearl Shards, and Stormlion Mandibles, or alternatively, Blood Orbs and Pearl Shards, the extra material here being necessary to lock this item behind a certain point in game progression. Now, I'll be lumping the final 2 pre-hard mode potions together as they intentionally directly oppose each other. We have the Zerg potion and the Zen potion. The Zerg potion inflicts the Zerg buff, which increases enemy spawn rates and the maximum spawn count by 400%. The Zen potion inflicts the Zen buff, which reduces enemy spawn rates by 60% and maximum spawn count by 70%. So you're using these items when you are trying to either scrap with as many monsters as you can, or interact with as few of them as humanly possible. The Zerg and Zen potions require Purified Gel, along with Demonic Bone Ash and Day Bloom, respectively. Okay, now it's time to talk about the hard mode potions. And getting right into it with a weird one, we have the Astral Injection. When used, this item gives the player mana sickness and deals 5 damage, but grants the Astral Injection buff, which provides 120 mana per second for 5 seconds. So it basically works like a mana potion over time, restoring 600 mana over those 5 seconds that the buff is active. As far as I know, this makes it the most effective mana potion in general. The only problem is that this is considered a buff potion and not a mana potion, so they can't automatically be used by the mana flower, which makes it a little inconvenient to use in practice. If such a downside doesn't deter you, however, you can make Astral Injections with Aureus Cells and Stardust, or Aureus Cells and Blood Orbs, and they can also be obtained from Astral Crates after you beat Astrum Aureus. Speaking of obtaining things, next up is the Ceaseless Hunger Potion, which has to be one of the greatest quality of life concepts that Terraria has ever seen. This potion grants the Ceaseless Hunger buff, which causes all items in the world to be sucked up by the player. It's just that simple. Use the potion, pick up everything. It really is the height of convenience. The unfortunate thing about this item is that its materials are locked away behind the pillars and a boss towards the very end of the game, so for like 90% of progression, it's not available. If you like the idea of this potion though and would like to use it before then, I would suggest downloading the Fargo's Mutant mod and trying the Big Suck potion as an alternative, which I love both for the fact that I inspired it, as well as the item being available much earlier in the game, and it also just being awesome. Continuing on, the next 3 potions are all flasks, so I'm going to cover them together. As you probably know, flasks are a type of potion that allow melee, whip, and rogue weapons to inflict debuffs on enemies, the duration of which depends on what weapon type is being used. Like you would expect, these flasks are used to inflict custom Calamity status effects. The Flask of Brimstone inflicts the Brimstone Flames debuff, which deals 30 damage per second, completely disables health regeneration, and is made with Ashes of Calamity. The Flask of Crumbling inflicts Crumbling, which multiplies enemies' damage reduction by 0.88. Not sure why it's mathed out like that, but that means that it's decreased. These are made with Essences of Sunlight. The Flask of Holy Flames inflicts the Holy Flames debuff, which deals 100 damage per second to enemies and disables health regeneration. So it's basically like an upgraded version of Brimstone Flames, coming much later in game progression after you've defeated Providence and can obtain Unholy Essence to create the flasks. I've never used any of the flasks, and hopefully having made an entire video including them will remind me that they exist next time I play through Calamity, because they sure could be useful. But anyways, here's the Gravity Normalizer potion. This potion grants the Gravity Normalizer buff, which disables the low gravity effect in space and makes the player immune to the distorted debuff. So it's almost a necessity if you're going to be fighting any really dangerous enemies in space, and it happens to be great for taking on the Vortex Pillar. You make the Gravity Normalizer potions with Aureus cells and a fish called the Aldebaran Alewife, Aldebaran being the brightest star in the Taurus constellation, and an alewife being an actual type of fish, if you are wondering. I'm wondering, why does this exist? This is an odd mushroom. That's just what it's called. You can purchase it for 1 platinum from the princess, and when consumed, this item gives the player the trippy buff for 1 hour. The trippy buff does just about exactly what you would expect it to. The screen becomes distorted, and hallucinations create fake copies of all nearby enemies and projectiles, which also all turn rainbow. The player also gains a 50% increase to their damage. I have no idea if that could ever be put to good use with how much this buff messes up the screen, but there you go. Next is the photosynthesis potion. Drinking it turns your skin into plant fibers or something, and gives you the photosynthesis buff. This buff provides the player with 6 extra life regeneration when standing still, which increases to 34 extra life regeneration if it is daytime. And no, you don't actually need to be in the sunlight for it to work. You can make photosynthesis potions with a trapper bulb and an essence of sunlight, or a lot of blood orbs. Finally, and I mean finally as in finally before I cover all of the food items, the soaring potion. It gives you the soaring buff, which increases wing flight time and horizontal flying speed by 10%. It also restores a small amount of the player's wing time when an enemy is hit by a true melee weapon. How much it restores being decided by this formula. So that's cool. Buffs that increase flight capabilities are always useful, and this one comes with a nice perk for those nutcases that actually play through Calamity with true melee weapons. You make these potions at an alchemy table with sunken sailfish, caught in the sunken sea, and a soul of flight. And that's almost everything. That covers basically all of the potions in the Calamity mod with custom modded buffs. However, food items are also technically considered buff potions, and rather important ones too, if anyone doesn't know, since the stats that the higher tier food buffs provide are pretty insane, even by modded Terraria standards. All of the vanilla food options are still available obviously, but Calamity adds some of its own, a couple of which come with some interesting quirks. I already mentioned that the Heidel stew was covered in another video, so we'll set that aside and start with the baguette. You bake this luxurious loaf in a furnace with a bunch of hay, as you do, and when consumed, the baguette gives you the well-fed buff for 5 minutes. And that really sucks. However, this item also provides the player with the baguette buff, which boosts the healing effect of red wine, a recovery potion, see my other video. So it seems to exist essentially just to be a part of a fun item combo and as a dedication to a Patreon donor. The Blasphemous Donut is a food item dropped by Impious Immolators, a post-Moonlord Hallow enemy. The food buff it provides is only of the 2nd tier, but it does give it to the player for an hour, which is an unusually long amount of time for a buff. Other than that, there isn't really anything special about this item, aside from having a really goofy name and a pun in the tooltip. It's just a decent food item. The Delicious Meat is also a little boring. It gives the Plenty Satisfied buff, like the Blasphemous Donut, but only for 30 minutes, so it's still just a decent food item. The one weird thing about it is that it is dropped by the Lord, which is a meme boss exclusive to the Get Fixed Boy world that is basically impossible to beat unless you no-hit the entire boss fight, which includes surviving a desperation phase where the boss shoots exomech lasers for 100 seconds straight. Sure. You can also buy the Delicious Meat from the Archmage for 50 silver. Finally, there's the Pot of Pain. This is an item that is dropped solely by another Get Fixed Boy exclusive Calamity boss, the XB Infinity Hecate. Wow, that thing looks like complete and utter bullshit. If you manage this, you can get your hands on the Pot of Pain, which has a use time of 901, 15 seconds, and grants the Exquisitely Stuffed buff for 33 minutes. Exquisitely Stuffed is the best food buff, so that sounds great, until you learn that the pot also inflicts you with 9 fire-based debuffs that also last for 33 minutes. So yeah, it's a meme item and a reference, just for the funsies, right? At least it's non-consumable, so you can experience the burning pain of 9 hells over and over again as many times as you wish. Anyways, that wraps it up. That is every buff potion and now every potion in general in the Calamity mod. Hope you found this knowledge useful, and thanks for sticking around this long. My Discord server and Patreon links are in the description if you want to check those out. And for now, I'm out of here. I will see you in the next one.